We're back. What a way to start the second day with a little bit of a drama. Welcome on behalf of Y Summit. I'd love to welcome you to our second day of our 15th annual Biopharma and MedTech PPM conference. What a pleasure. We've had an incredibly successful day yesterday, filled with so many wonderful speakers, keynotes, case studies, panel discussions, Q&A. I was amazed by the flow of comments coming here. And it's actually my pleasure to welcome you. You can see a beautiful lady right next to me. Welcome, Jennifer Christensen. She's going to open up our second day of the conference. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me. So I was asked to talk to you today about global planning for global implementation. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Of course. I'm gonna see if it goes, and then I'm gonna give you a word, and then you can hop right straight into it.
Okay.
I did want to say a few words about yourself, but please, it'll be a pleasure if you could maybe just share something about you quickly. And probably people are here to listen to you rather than me, so feel free.
Sure, happy to do that. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me make sure we get this here. My share button is grayed out. If we want to,
your share button is grayed out. Just a quick note: if you are on a Mac, you can change it in system preferences, and you can allow your screen sharing publicly, so it can actually record your screen. If not, I do have your presentation, so not a problem. It all reminds us that we're human, and this all happens.
Okay, so if it's not cooperating, so if you could pull it up while I introduce myself, that would be great. Of course,
please do so, and feel free to throw in a joke if you'd like as well.
No problem at all. So my name is Jennifer Christensen. I work for AbbVie. My current role is Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. I've spent much of my career working in mergers and acquisitions. I've been based in healthcare for about the last 10 years. I was in technology prior to that. So the transaction I'm currently working on is, I think, my 39th. I went back and did a count here. 39th transaction I've worked on. I worked on small tuck-in acquisitions. I've worked on very large transactions. So what we're going to talk about here today is really tried and true over time. There's not, we're not going to go into the specifics on a given deal, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions you might have. At the end of the day, process is set up to try to help, right? But we can't get lost in process for the sake of process. So one of the things that I found in working with lots of different leaders over time is different people have different styles and different methodologies. But the biggest thing we can do is listen and learn from the people around us. Surround yourself with people with expertise from lots of different functional and cross-functional areas. Understand the company and the corporate culture that you're working with. And then this framework here that I'm going to share with you can be applied in lots of different circumstances and lots of different ways. Any luck with the slides? Otherwise,
yes, we'll be sharing it with you soon.
Okay.
This is your time to tell the joke now if you'd like.
Yeah. Joking is not my thing. My kids, we had a family draw. So I'm married and I have 5 children. And last year at Thanksgiving, they decided that they were going to have a vote and rank the family members based on who is the funniest. And I was second from the bottom. There's 7 of us. I'm like, hold on a minute. That is so unfair. I am blessed, I guess, that I have some very funny family members, very silly family members. But so much of what I do is serious all the time that I think outside of work, I try to be really lighthearted and I try to bring fun into lots of things. And so you'll see that here. But apparently my family doesn't.
Yes, yeah, we can actually see my colleague who deals with the technicalities. He's sharing the screen and the presentation for you. So fingers crossed, I'm going to leave you to it, and we're in the background, and please enjoy it. And everyone enjoy this keynote. This is, again, Jennifer Christensen, the Vice President Strategic Initiatives from AbbVie. So enjoy, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I appreciate your time today. As I said, we're going to talk about process development within global projects. So this same framework can be used if you're working in a single country, but some of what you'll see here, particularly the localization section, is really focused on country-specific needs. So if you'll go to the next slide. So from a basic program lifecycle, and this sort of philosophy or framework can be used for personal projects. It can be used in an M&A situation. It can be used for lots of different things. I use it, much to my children's dismay, for family vacation planning as well. So at the end of the day, we're looking to have a vision. So where are we going? What are the expectations? Due diligence really comes down to information gathering. And we'll go through each one of these here briefly, but the planning and the governance. So how are we going to go about orchestrating it? What kind of structure are we putting in place? How do we escalate issues or concerns? Having a global plan works really well, but when you get into specific countries or specific functions, specific sub-functions, deep within a country, there are elements there that are unique and specific, and we need to be mindful of those. In order to have a successful end-to-end program, we need to have global, area, and local considerations all baked in so that everybody is heard and all needs are accounted for. Execution mode is where most people really focus in doing those earlier stages. If you do those well, then the execution part usually goes very smoothly. Readiness review, how do we know when we're ready? Everybody wants to get, past the goal line, but we need to do a temperature check before going live. And then there's the go live, which you'll see is made up of multiple components. I wish we had one of those easy buttons to push, but it becomes a little bit more complicated in a program that's multifaceted. And this piece I have here at the end, but in thinking about it, it may be more appropriate to have a bar across the whole bottom that goes across, because it's really important that we take time through each phase to recognize the contributions the team is making, especially those who are going above and beyond. These programs are very taxing on lots of different functions. In companies I've been with, there usually aren't dedicated people where this is their full-time job. So in most cases, people are doing transaction-related work, large-scale project work on top of their current responsibilities. So recognizing that is important. So if you go to the next slide. So I try to think of these programs, and I put it into two different boxes. And you'll see with each phase that we're going to talk about here today, we have the same framework. What do I need to know? What do I need to understand in order to bring us to a set of deliverables that are going to guide us then through the phase? So in the overview, in the vision, what are we trying to accomplish? What is the goal? What does success look like? How are we going to measure that success? Who needs to be involved? One of the things that people often say at AbbVie is, who's the D? Who's the decision maker? Who are the people who are required to provide input into the decision? And then in an ideal world, you can get to consensus where the decision maker, him or herself, is less relevant. But if you are at an impasse where you could go one way or the other and it's not really clear to the team and you need guidance, then knowing who that decision maker is important. So coming out of this phase, you would expect to have a program charter that says, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's some high-level milestones or key activities that are going to be required in order for us to get to the goal line and feel like we're successful. I added this glossary at the end, and the reason is because as you bring people in to a project, every company, every industry has acronyms galore. We have the alphabet soup, and those acronyms in different environments, different industries, different companies can mean different things. So if you start out each program and as you onboard each person, even if it's just in your backup deck, if you always have a glossary of terms, then you prevent either people from feeling silly or wanting to ask and trying to figure out where's the appropriate person to ask without feeling silly. So having that glossary in front just helps build overall confidence of the team. And what you'll see as we go through this is these projects are very complicated. So having people, each person feel confident along the way that A, they're heard, B, they're understood, and C, that they understand are going to be critical components to your success. If you go to the next slide. From a due diligence perspective, this is probably the most important part. If you handle due diligence correctly, that means that you truly understand what's expected. So most of the teams I have are broken down into 12 to 18 functions, depending on the complexity of the project, depending on how the company is set up. So you'll want to follow your company's structure and set up your teams and identify your team members based on current company hierarchy and organizational structure. But in order to really get into a planning where you've got key activities and key milestones that are going to drive the program, you really need to understand all of the nuances. So function by function by function, what do they need to know? What information is going to be important for decision making? What systems and processes already exist? So understanding the as is, because your planning stage then is going to help you to get from the as is to your to be, matching the vision that we just talked about a minute ago. Are there any steps that are going to be linear versus in parallel? So understanding, are there pre-positioning steps that are required? And so the output of understanding all of these things should hopefully be a comprehensive database where you have all information in one place, easy for people to access, with security and controls put in place so that any information that's confidential or should be only shared with certain groups can be managed accordingly. So having, whether you're using SharePoint or Salesforce.com or Smartsheets or something else like that, there are lots and lots out there. Talk to your company IT department if you don't already have one. They likely have solutions where you can collate data into places. Then in addition to that, you'll find that there's more information than any one person could ingest in a sitting. So it's important that as you have all of these, you bring those findings together and summarize them in a clear, easy way for people to understand and follow. Next slide. So now that you've completed all of your due diligence, what do you need to know for planning? So for planning, the top item on my list here really is about who has the skill set. As you look at each of the functions, who has the skill set, who has the bandwidth, and most importantly, in my mind, who has the attitude required. You may get into a situation where people don't understand how to manage change. People don't understand the program. But if you have the right people with the right skill sets, and most importantly, the right attitude, you can teach them the things that they need to know about the program, about the process, about what you're going to do, if they have the drive, the commitment, and sometimes perseverance to be able to participate and help lead the team. As you identify those people on the team, you'll want to make sure that their management is aligned with them being part of the team, because the last thing you want is to bring people into a team and then find that their time has been allocated in so many other ways, and then you're having to onboard new people. So if you get approval from the executive management team from the get-go of who this team is, what the roles and responsibilities are, what's expected of them, and you proactively communicate both with those individuals as well as their management team, and everybody is bought in, then at the end of the day, the program will be more successful. What are the impacts? The impacts to people, to processes, to systems, to budget. So as you work through the planning stages, you'll want to make sure all those things are accounted for so that you can have a robust change management plan that includes all of the communications, all of the testing, all of the training, that includes a budget, and that budget is reviewed and approved by all of your functional stakeholders, especially your finance team. So then the other thing would be to keep in mind, are there any constraints? Are there other programs that are going on in parallel where you have overlapping either resources, milestones? Can you line up milestones so that the same people can work together to accomplish multiple things at the same time? So efficiency and effectiveness are going to be really important as you go through this planning stage, because the last thing you want to do is have people feel like their time has been wasted. So I always introduce myself to the teams and to the new executive teams or the board, whoever it might be, to say, my job is to make your job as easy as it can be. And so this planning stage is really where that comes in, is to say, how can we take all of these factors and bring this puzzle together in a way that's going to be as efficient as possible? So having a detailed roadmap that shows each wave of what you're going to introduce when, which systems will be impacted, how many people will be impacted, what countries are going to be impacted, any other overlapping programs that are called out there where you can line up those elements. So the output of this phase is really what gets communicated very broadly across the organization. So you're going to end up with a team where you can showcase who the leads are for each of those functions, along with their roles and responsibilities, so that they know what's expected, so that others who are working with them know what's expected of them. You're not only going to have those functional teams, but you'll have cross-functional work streams. So depending on what industry you're in, those cross-functional work streams might vary. But so here's an example, since I think most of you are coming from healthcare backgrounds, is I strongly recommend that you have a cross-functional work stream dedicated to supply continuity. So we need to make sure always that we have the right product in the right place with the right labels and the right licenses at the right time. So there are all kinds of things that would go into that supply continuity work stream. You need to make sure, right, that you have your quality team and your labeling team, your supply chain team, your regulatory team, your pharmacovigilance team. So legal needs to be involved. In some cases, environmental health and safety. You're going to have somebody from HR, because you need to make sure that if you've got a qualified person that's required in a specific location, you need to make sure that real estate is involved in case they're moving facilities. So this is, a lot perhaps to throw at you, but that's one cross-functional work stream and an example. You would want to do the same thing with order to cash, record to report, procure to pay, a communications and change management team. I'm rattling them off, but depending on what the project is, you'll want to thoughtfully consider not only who your functional team leads are, but what cross-functional work streams you need and who the leader for those cross-functional work streams should be, who's best positioned to bring those pieces together, because they're going to need dedicated work plans with interdependencies for those cross-functional work streams. So you'll want to have standard meeting cadence. So touch bases with each functional team, with each cross-functional team, a whole all hands meeting or a town hall type meeting where you can give regular standing readouts to the team of the progress that's being made, any large scale interdependencies that are coming together, touch bases on milestones. You may have to do deep dives on specific topics as they come up, especially if you're in an M&A situation and you're dealing with two different ways of working with two different companies that are coming together, or a divestiture where you're carving out a significant portion of the business. Understanding that as is and the to be becomes more complicated in an M&A situation. If you're working on a project within your own organization and you don't have as many outside influences, there's less of that, but be mindful that there's an element of that as well. So some companies work very well cross-functionally, others work independently in a more siloed fashion. But when you're working on a large-scale global process, there can't be any silos. You really need to bring people together and build trust so that communication is open and transparent, and people have a good understanding of not only their piece, but how their piece might impact others and how others' pieces impact them. Detailed training plans, really important. Testing plans, communication plans. And then at the end of the day, a budget. It's really important, as we said early on, for planning, that you have a budget that's set up by functional area, tracked by quarter, and that you have a mechanism for collecting where are we at, what expenses have come in, and you're in a position to know where you're at and recalibrate if you need to. Next slide. So what do you need to know for localization? So you've already have your global team. You already have your global work plans. So you're well positioned. You've got milestones and activities. You've got owners. You've got due dates. All of those things you did during the planning stage for a baseline. But now as you go country by country, you're going to find nuances. They may be legal nuances. They may be regulatory nuances. They may be things that are local customs. They may be dates that you need to be very aware of, whether they're local bank holidays or large-scale celebrations that happen during times where, A, you want to recognize it, appreciate it, build it into your program, and B, you want to make sure that you don't have any critical go live dates or milestones that are due around that time, because you don't want to monopolize people's time. You want them to also be able to focus on those things that they need to do for themselves and their overall well-being and their families. So trying to do the balance between getting the work done and taking all of those local elements into consideration is going to be an important part of building trust. It also will help you to set up meetings accordingly, making sure that you're mindful of languages. And do we need someone who speaks local languages? Do we need all of our communications to be translated, or do people speak a common language? Time zones. If we've got multiple people coming into a meeting, we need to know where they located so that we're not scheduling meetings for people at 11 p.m. or 3:30 a.m. or something in between, where we have reasonably timed meetings. And that may mean that you have to have 2 or 3 meetings of the same type in a given day if the timing of that communication is important and you need to reach people where they are. So at the end of the day, you'll then take that global work plan that you developed and you'll tweak it. So you'll add in local nuances. You might have to look at specific dates and understand how they might need to change in order to make that work plan meaningful in a given country. So you'll do your copy and paste of your global work plan into each country. You'll identify those items that are not required for a specific country. You might have certain activities in your global work plan that that aren't relevant for a given country because the activity isn't done in the country. It's actually done by the global team. You may have items in your work plan. You might have a column in your work plan where you call out which activities are to be done by the global team, the regional team, the local country team. That way, as you go into the work plan, everybody understands, even to a greater level of granularity, what's expected of them. And so that global, regional, local designation will be helpful there. Identifying those not related activities will happen in this localization phase. One tip in this phase is I really recommend, as you create those country level work plans, you don't delete any items. Just mark them as not applicable and you can hide them. But one thing that we found is as we move into the early execution stage, sometimes there's some oopsies, right? Where somebody says, oh gosh, maybe we thought this item wasn't going to be relevant, but now that we understand something a little bit more, we need to add it back in. You're in a position then where you can unhide it, uncheck the not applicable box, and it's already in your work plan rather than having to scramble to see what was missed. So at the end of the day, you should have a certified, localized work plan that includes your global activities, your regional activities, your local activities, each with owners, due dates. In some cases, you'll need a start date and an end date. Any dependencies that are identified should also be there, and a calendar of your primary milestones as a summary is also valuable coming out of the localization stage. We go to the next slide. Execution, and this is where everybody who we identified in that localization stage knows what they need to do when, and they're delivering. So your program management team is checking in with them on a regular basis. You have regular reporting that's done to the management team. You might have a series of issues that are escalated and follow your governance process that you set up early on so that you can answer questions. I have a reference here to telescoping. So telescoping, in my mind, is when are you at the 30,000 foot level focused on strategy, and when are you deep diving in to work through details with the team. So it's important that you recognize what the team needs of you and when, so that you can help them in the most effective way. In some cases, they have all the details covered and they don't need help. In other cases, they're either missing something, there's confusion, and if you're able to step in and become part of that function and help them to work through it, roll up your sleeves and get it done and help them, that pays off too. That's another way that you can help build trust with the organization, but that requires you to have working knowledge of that function or have someone on your team or a delegate, but know who your delegates would be so that if additional help is needed within any given function, whether it's those global functional leads that you identified or someone else who's on your direct staff, that you have the ability to help those as they're struggling. What do you need to deliver? So coming out of execution, you should already have, as part of your planning and localization, a really good idea. But in here, you're going to solidify your roadmap, your overall timeline. You're going to communicate it and make sure everybody across the organization who has a need to know does. Detailed kickoff materials, onboarding materials, so that each person who's involved in the project really understands it. At this point, you've been working on it for some time and you have detailed, intimate knowledge of what your vision is and how this program is going to roll out. But remember that each person coming into the program is new to it. So I call it third grade friendly. So you want your onboarding materials and your kickoff materials to be friendly enough, straightforward enough, using as much plain English, as few acronyms as possible, keeping your glossary in the background where necessary, but try to keep it simple so that people understand, which isn't always easy to do when you're dealing with complex projects. You'll have standard meeting cadences. I recommend that you put as many of the meetings that you know are going to happen on people's calendars as early as possible. Even if those readiness reviews that you're going to host are 6 months before go live and it's a 2-year program, if you know when those are going to be and you can align people's calendars and put them on the schedule 6, 8, 12 months in advance, people have a target. They know when things are going to happen. It reduces the anxiety of the people who aren't familiar with what's going to happen, because now they have, concrete meetings on the calendars. They know where to be, and they have an idea of what the agenda for each of those meetings will be, and are better prepared for that. And then your report out templates. Who do you need to report out to? How often? Having standard templates that are easy for people to read will help people to focus on your content rather than on trying to follow different slides for every different meeting. So if the meetings look the same and you have a standard template, it will help people meeting after meeting after meeting to follow more quickly. Next slide. Readiness. How do we know when we're ready? So what are those metrics and milestones? What are those key activities that are absolutely must have for go live? So these are things that are required for legal purposes. These are things that are required for regulatory purposes. These are things that the business cannot live without on day one. There's no interim that you could put in place. There's no manual workaround, however painful. These are things that absolutely must be for day one. So all those things should be accounted for in your work plan. You should know what they are. People should really be focused on those, because as you get into your readiness review, all of those things must be done, or you must have line of sight to them being done prior to go live. For those things that are really important for day one, but aren't absolute must-haves, you may be in a situation where one or more of those things wasn't able to be accomplished for any number of reasons going into day one. So in that case, you need to have your backup plan ready. So what would your manual process be? Who would need to be involved? Is there training set up for that? How long would it need to be put in place, etc.? From a testing perspective, very important to know who your testing people are going to be early, getting those testing elements put onto people's calendars, have detailed testing scripts written, get results, get screenshots, and have a detailed view out of those testing results so that everybody feels confident that each and every element that you intended to test or you have the ability to test for is tested and proven out ahead of time. Sometimes you can do that in a testing environment. Sometimes you do that in production. And in those cases, that often ends up being on a weekend or at odd hours when people aren't working in the system. A detailed cutover plan, sometimes that we call it the tick-tock. Sometimes it's hour by hour. Sometimes it's day by day of what needs to happen in order for cutover to happen. Oftentimes the cutover is really focused on your finance area, your your IT space. So all of your systems and your back-end processes are largely involved in your cutover plan. Training, does everybody know what they need to do? Especially if you've got systems involved, process changes. Does everybody know what is going to happen? Because once you flip the switch and they're being asked to do something differently, the more they know ahead of time, the fewer questions you're going to get. And all of those questions that come in on the back end, they turn into noise. So the more we can do proactively to help make sure people are comfortable, the less uncomfortable they're going to be later, and the fewer questions you're going to get. Other considerations, this is a global lump, but we have to watch world markets, right? We don't know what's going on in every country around the world, but if you're preparing for a go live and you know that a country is in a situation of political unrest, if you know that you're going live in an area where wildfires are prevalent, where hurricanes are prevalent, where other things are happening, being wary of what's going on. Watch the news for each of those countries. Be mindful, because if something happens, you need to be able to pivot, and you need to know what will happen in a situation where unexpectedly, for nobody's control, you won't be able to go live. So if you go to the next slide. Go live is more than just a day, but important that you understand what's required. Do you have legal documents that need to be completed? And are you prepared for any post go live activities, month end close, etc.? Systems access, people, do they have access to the facility? Do they need new badges, etc.? And the next slide is the most exciting one. If you could flip. And that's about recognition and celebration. I said early on, but it's really important that all along the way, you recognize the people who are going above and beyond. You recognize people for their commitment, for their attitude, for their deliverables, and make sure that people recognize it. You may have a budget allocated for additional celebrations. Some people do t-shirts for the program. Some people have a pizza party. Some people do something more elaborate. But when you did your budget planning early on, you should plan for whether you're going to be able to do some kind of reward and recognition celebration, either for individuals or for a group, and make sure that those are budgeted for. But try to build in fun along the way. I know a lot of what I'm going through here is focused on rigor and process, but anything you can do to bring in humor, to have lighthearted fun, to have team building activities along the way helps the team to connect with one another and ultimately bring success to the program. Any questions?
We do. Jennifer, this was incredible, and what an excellent start to our second day. We did have few human challenges when we started, but it was incredible. And there was a question, but we're running a little over time, and there are actually panelists ready. And if you'd like, I would love everyone to have their questions answered, and all of the questions will be posted on our PPM workout platform. So if you're not there, please join, and this way everyone can actually get connected, and all like-minded people from the PPM field and the industry can actually connect and get together. So if you'd like, hop on there, everyone, and we're going to be posting the questions there soon, right after the conference, so everyone has a space to actually have their questions answered.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me.
This was incredible. Thank you, Jennifer. What an honor. Thank you so much.